Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Winners of the World. I'm your host, Dylan Whiteley, also known as Dylan the Winner. With me tonight is a very special guest. A good friend of mine, Braeden Cook, has agreed to be with us tonight. Braeden, how are you this evening?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Just happy to be here, like always, whenever we're hanging out. It's just a great time.
The reason I chose to have Braeden on here this evening is because throughout this semester, we've talked a little bit about, obviously, successful figures. Those people who excel in their field, they're considered, winners at what they do. But throughout this, we've talked a lot about people who are currently considered successful. They're alive. They're still thriving in their profession. They're still active. So they're modern day present characters that are well known. And with this episode, I wanted to do a little bit of a spin. I wanted to change it to look at the bigger picture, take a look back in the history books, and talk about some historical figures that would be considered successful in their time and may still today be considered successful or winners of the world. I'll have you shut that off if you don't mind.
All right.
So, Braeden, I will start by asking you, I guess I'll give a little insight into why I asked Braeden. When it came to talking about history and historical figures, he came to mind immediately because I've known Braeden my whole life. We've always gone to school together, and he has been someone who's always found an interest in history. If there's ever a topic brought up that involves a historical figure, a president, whatever it may be, chances are Braeden will have something to say, good, bad, or indifferent about it. So when it came down to talking about historical figures, it was obviously a no-brainer. So I guess, Braeden, let me start by just asking, what about history is so intriguing to you? What got you so interested in it, and what has you still interested in it?
Well, it's definitely evolved over time. So when I was little, I guess it probably actually started with my obsession with dinosaurs. So that's almost as far back in history as you can possibly get, as millions of years ago.
Right.
Of course, but it probably evolved when my grandpa, he started there was this day I can remember specifically. I was sitting on his lap and he pulled out a $10 bill, and he told me who was on the $10 bill. And his name was Alexander Hamilton, and that he got killed by Aaron Burr. He was assassinated in a duel. And he told me that story at a very young age. And so immediately,
not scarring at all.
No, I didn't find it scarring. I was just like, holy crap, that's a cool story. That's behind and it's on money. Money's just cool because you get to use it to spend different things. But I don't know if it was necessarily maybe the meaning behind the face on the dollar bill that kind of spoke to me or what it was, but something just kind of clicked. And for a little while there, I got kind of obsessed with looking at different types of paper money, bills, started collecting coins from all over the world. My mom will even still make jokes about how she had the toughest job as the tooth fairy because instead of getting, just putting a dollar coin under the pillow or putting a couple, quarters or whatever, she had to go find money from Germany. So, from friends and ask around, and she'd, give up some of her money that she'd collect and be like, oh my gosh, I got to help out this kid. He's just so interested in this stuff just because, she wanted to make me happy. But anyway, and so just kind of it bloomed from there, though, learning the presidents that were on the coins. And then eventually, again, my grandparents were like, oh, hey, here's this little board that shows you. It was like a little dry erase board, and it had all of the faces of all of the presidents ever in the United States. And I remember Obama being on there, so it was around 2008 when that was, so about 8 years old, 8 or 9. And I just became so fascinated with that entire thing. I ended up, just there, and it just kind of bloomed. Started learning about government. I learned about I could name the 3 branches of government as a 10-year-old because I was so fascinated with it, and just the more I got into it, the more facts and details there were to know about it, and I don't know, and it's just continued from there.
Wow, I bet you were a real hoot at class parties.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of people challenged me to be like, oh yeah, can you really name all of the presidents?
Right.
And then I did, and they were just like, oh, you can.
Real quick, we'll make this a real brief thing before we get actually back on topic. But in 30 seconds or less, every historian has a certain time period they go back and visit, what would be yours?
Wow.
Just real quick. Put you on. I know, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'll try and get there. Oh my gosh.
Before we get back to the actual show.
Shoot. Oh my gosh.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It was just something that came up.
Okay.
We can circle back to it.
I'll go to the American Revolution. That period. So it'd be around the 18th century, 19th century. It's incredibly fascinating. So many people get like so many cliches associated with it, but then there's just so much more depth to the era. The leaders at the time in the United States were just incredibly complex, and in other parts of the world there's a lot of other interesting things. But anyway, there you go. That's that's my short answer.
Right. Went down a bit of a rabbit hole there, but that's fine.
It's but yeah, I think there was like 2 other questions associated with that. I went off on the rant explaining why I got into history.
Nah. Yeah. That's how it goes, unscripted. So who is someone in history, if you could just name 1 or 2, because I know there's so many, who is someone in history that you would say is considered a real successful figure or a real winner of that time?
I think, there's a lot, but you can go.
It's tough to narrow down.
In the late, if you're going like successful in American history, you could, as far as like in the business realm, the business field, you could definitely go with, Carnegie, who in steel. Not just steel banking, like all kind. J.P. Morgan's another one. Like these are companies that still exist today, but it started in the 1880s, 1890s, 1900, around that time. That's when these huge companies were being built, and they still exist today. Rockefeller, J.D. Rockefeller, he's another one that's absolutely huge, big oil baron. Their family's still very rich and powerful, one of the richest in America. And so as far as like on the spectrum of like wealth and being successful and winning in life in that sense, yes, those are all examples of men that started at very either middle to lower class and got into business and were just absolutely cutthroat and knew what they wanted and were not afraid to go and take risks and build businesses that helped create America.
Okay, I'll leave the president question for a little later in the show because I'm sure you could talk about some successful presidents. Tying back to the few figures you just talked about, and I guess you kind of answered this question in the previous answer, but I'll have you talk a little bit more about it. Were they considered? Because now we see people that are obviously successful, prominent, and they're currently considered winners, successful. Were these people considered successful just for the present time, or are they still considered successful to this day? Like, does their legacy still live on, or was it just they were successful for their time period?
No, they were definitely exceptional. Each one of them were exceptional human beings. Part of the reason, like the skyscrapers in New York, came from, I believe it's Carnegie Steel. The process of refining and making steel, the way that he helped develop, and that's what his company did, was it made it to where it was cheap enough to where they could mass produce it, and that mass production helped fuel the steel industry that allowed for the creation of the large skyscrapers you see in any major city, probably in the entire, like almost in the entire world, actually. Okay. And that, Rockefeller's another one, same type of deal. His oil refinery, the way that he refined crude oil into something that could be used for petroleum and kerosene for kerosene lamps, and that's how millions of homes across America began to be able to cheaply light their homes, and it spread like wildfire. And then even again later on in his career, he was just his ingenuity was shown again when kerosene lamps started going the way of the dodo bird, because light bulbs were being invented. Mm-hmm. Rockefeller's company is still around. Like, well, what the heck are we going to start use all of this oil in this oil refinery for? Boom! You get Henry Ford with mass production of the automobile, and what they need is refined oil for gasoline. And the Rockefeller was able to adjust his company to start making gasoline instead of kerosene, and that made being able to adapt with the times and staying relevant. It was and at that time everyone knew who he was because he was a household name. Like it's the the ideas of trust busting. These are the companies that the government eventually was just like, you've got way too much power. You're way too big. We're going to have to bust you up. Like Rockefeller Standard Oil was
Right.
one, Standard Motors, General Motors again. Like these companies were just so successful, so good at what they did, that the government was even just like, okay, guys, you gotta
Let's cool it a little.
You gotta share the wealth a little
Right.
bit. You know, you can get into politics whether that's good or not. But anyway,
so success, we'll talk about here in just a minute. There's no set definition. It can be seen any which way. But do you think as a society our view of success has changed over time, or are a lot of the principles still the same?
No, I'd say it's absolutely, definitely has changed over time, but I would say it was fairly consistent as far as like your normal, like your standard idea of success, what success was. I'd say it was probably fairly consistent throughout up until like the 1950s, probably in America. And basically like the standard of success, at least in America, was the idea of being able to live, just kind of being able to live, to survive, to live in freedom, like to be able to build up your family, to have kids, to be able to live just basically a healthy, normal life without, relatively comfortably.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was kind of have your own piece of land. Like that was kind of the American dream. It was not necessarily almost ever being it was not necessarily being the Rockefellers or being the Carnegies or the JP Morgans. It was not going on and being just so big business and being successful to where you own almost anything that you possibly want. It was very much like, I just want to go live a good life, a life that's, where I can raise a family safely, not worried about wars, not worried about famine is another one, being able to feed your family and help them to live a good life.
So I guess you could say that the ideal has kind of changed from like a survive sort of focus to a more of a thrive focus, I guess.
Kind of, but even in those terms, like that's even more of a, even there's been changes with even that. So the idea of being able to have your own patch of land, of being able to live and bring your family safely on your own little bit of land like that actually probably was the older idea of what it meant to thrive. Mm-hmm. Because if you look, we're all like, so, we're a country full of immigrants. That's where most of all of our population came from. Almost today is all of its people who have been came from other countries. They're coming from countries where they did not own the land. Their families could be taken away from them for plagues, could have been taken away from them from who knows what, from a war. You could be sent off to war to fight some crazy battle because the Queen of England's mad at the King of France this week.
Right.
And so, and so they're running from that kind of life to where, oh, wait, here in America, the government actually doesn't really care what you're doing. You go move out west, they'll actually give you a piece of land for a fair amount of money, and you're able to go and raise crops, have a cow, have some family chickens, and you can go live out there with maybe a couple of neighbors, have a small town, and you don't have to worry about, take Russia, for example, the Kazakhs coming in just saying, demanding a huge amount of taxes, taking half or more of the produce that you've produced and saying, hey, we'll be back next year. You don't have that kind of dynamic whatsoever. And so thriving in that point of time actually looked very much like just having your own little piece of land to grow up. I mean, to raise up a family like that. And again, this is kind of more from the male point of view, in my sense. I mean, a woman would have been slightly from just like wanting to have a good husband that's able to take care and provide for her at that point in time, because of course the West was going to be dangerous, and there's all kinds of crazy situations that can happen. But anyway, so there we go.
I'll have you turn that on real quick for me if you don't mind. I have a couple quick audio clips for you, and we'll kind of go through these. But I want you to listen to someone talk about success and how it's kind of different for everyone. I'll play this for you real quick.
The thing about success is that it's not really a set definition. Everyone has their own version of it. Just like my uncles, they didn't go to college, but they still have their own company now.
So I guess I play that to ask you this, and you can shut that off here just for a minute so we don't have this echo in our ears. But what would you personally say you consider success is? What are your values? What do you think personally is considered being successful?
Well, I gotta say, I'm honestly, it's incredibly hard to say. I mean, obviously, like good grades. I find that like that's something successful. Working hard. Accomplishments. Probably like almost anyone else. Like if I'm able to be able to do my job well, working at the bowling alley with my father, like that's success. I'm succeeding. Being able to make money. Having good relationships with friends is a big one for me. If I'm able to be a good friend that's there and being able to talk and have a well-rounded relationship with people, that's also success. But also just probably just as a general definition, doing the best that I can in anything that I'm trying to do at any given moment. And it changes a lot. I'm a very busy person with so many different things that I'm involved in. Success could be a very small thing, but it could also be a huge thing, such as trying a huge final that I have coming up that I'm hoping to get an A in or a paper.
Okay, I'll have you turn that back on for me real quick. Now we're gonna get a little more personal, and I'm gonna have you listen to this real quick.
What would you say are some successes that you've had in your own life?
If you could just give an example or two, just nothing too extensive, just a brief example of some successes that you've had.
Probably the most. There's been a couple of successes as far as like just things I've been able to accomplish in college. I was able to revive the College Republicans chapter here on campus. It's been a blast. We've had a lot of fun. I've met some amazing people with that experience, and we've been able to build a club that used to not exist to existing, and we've turned the funding for that club. It used to have like $36 in it or something like that from like, probably a good 10, maybe 15 years ago from when the club was still alive. We changed that into like, we've got a couple $100s in it now. Like we've been able to multiply that money exponentially almost just within the course of almost just a year and a half of working. And so that's one success that I definitely could call.
Okay.
Very good.
Very neat. Last question, and I'll make it a rapid fire question because we're going a little long just because we kind of got lost in conversation.
Because it's me.
No, right? I didn't want to say it, but
okay.
we'll just have a real brief wrap up.
Yeah.
I'll give you a rapid fire, 30 seconds or less answer.
I'll try. You'll probably take a minute.
Yeah, it might. Who is considered in your book a successful president? If you could name one, and maybe why. Rapid fire.
Gosh. Okay, okay, fine. I'll give a not generic answer because George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, favorites. Those are great.
Right.
Ronald Reagan's another
Obviously.
favorite. Okay, yeah. So I'm not going to give any of those. I'll give a unpopular opinion. I think Calvin Coolidge actually had a fairly successful presidency because his values going into his presidency was very much like, hey, I'm the president, but I'm also not supposed to be doing a ton of domestic policy. Like, that's the Congress's job. I'm here to make sure the Congress is going to stay in check. I'm more towards, like, foreign policy. He was very much more pro the Constitution of what the president's supposed to be via the Constitution and not what the people expect the president to be. And so I just absolutely respect that. I think it's something that our presidents could learn from in major ways, especially, with the amount of power and stuff that they use. But anyway, just as a simple answer, Calvin Coolidge would be I would say he's a very good, successful president.
Maybe next episode we'll teach them what rapid fire means. No, I'm just kidding. I thank you so much.
It'd be good for me. It'd be a good learning moment for me.
Braeden, I thank you so much for being here. I thank you for taking the time to talk to us a little bit and give a couple personal stories and personal thoughts. Me and Braeden are probably going to cut the cameras and spend the rest of the night talking because that's just how we do it. But thank you so much, Braeden, for being here, and we'll see you next time. Thank you guys for watching this semester on Winners of the World, and until next time, go out and be winners. We'll see you later, guys.